Okay, alright.
Hello and welcome back to the Make Lemonade podcast, a show brought to you by Lemon Squeezy, as we hope to inspire you to earn money from your own lemonade stand. I'm one of your co-hosts, James, and as usual, I'm back here with JFR, who's the co-founder and CEO of Lemon Squeezy. And we're back today with another guest, who is Jay Clouse, the founder of Creator Science, which is a platform with a membership, community, courses, a podcast, newsletter, and more. Jay has scaled his media business to over 50k a month while studying the best creators in the business. Creator Science was born out of a newsletter he started in 2017, which has grown to over 50,000 subscribers, then a podcast in 2019, which has millions of downloads, and in 2023, he built his YouTube channel to over 60,000 subs. In this episode, we break down his revenue split, how he's managed to double the business for 2 years running, how he provides value in a $3,000 a year membership, and what processes he's put in place to create so much content to drive a thriving media business. Let's get into this chat with Jay Clouse.
Okay, alright.
Just to get my head around everything you have right now, which is active, you've got Creator Science, which is your business. You've got the community, you've got a plethora of courses, which include masterclasses as well. You've got your podcast, which is now called Creator Science. You've got your newsletter. You've got a personal newsletter. And now YouTube is a big thing for you. Is there anything I'm missing there? Is that everything you've got on right now?
There's a syndicate as well, but I don't think we even need to cover all that. We certainly don't need to cover the personal newsletter unless that's like an end type thing. I think, I'm basically building a media company that spans wherever I can find my typical, customer avatar. So it's a bunch of different platforms, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to help people become professional creators, and I'll meet them where they are to make that happen.
And you've been creating events, communities, pretty much since 2012. You started the Unreal Collective, I believe, in 2017, which was then acquired by Pat Flynn and Smart Passive Income in 2020.
That's right.
So that was sort of where you got your start in being a community builder. And when was it you jumped out on your own with Creator Science?
Well, in some form or fashion, it's been a work in progress since 2017. The brand really took shape in August of 2022 is when I started operating under the Creator Science name. Renamed the podcast into Creator Science, the newsletter. Well, the podcast I renamed last April, but yeah, I would say the Creator Science brand has existed for about 18 months. The work itself, I've been doing in some form or fashion since 2017.
Can we go back a little bit to when Smart Passive Income, Pat Flynn, what was that like? How did you guys get connected? Why did he want to buy it? Obviously, Pat Flynn has been around a long time. Smart Passive Income's been around a long time. One of the OGs in terms of, here's how much I made. People don't know who he is. I'm just curious, what that was like working with Pat.
To be totally honest, I was not a consumer of Pat's content. I didn't know his stuff, really, when we started talking. What happened was, in 2017, when I was doing my group coaching program called Unreal Collective, I was cobbling together tools to kind of support that. And that looked like running the community on Slack and using Zoom for our group calls. And that sounds so basic and table stakes sitting here at the beginning of 2024. But in 2020 or 2017, I was literally explaining to people how to download and use Zoom. People weren't using Slack as a community tool by and large. So it was very different and innovative at the time. And that was when I got introduced to Matt Gartland, who lives here in Columbus, Ohio. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I interacted with him through this group accelerator, group coaching program I was doing. And he saw the way that I was building community there in Slack. Fast forward to 2020, years passed. Matt's business was acquired and joined forces with Pat, actually, because Matt was working with Pat on a book launch, on course launches. And in 2020, they decided to accelerate their plans for building a digital membership, an online membership. And Matt reached out to me to consult on how to set up their community so that it was as engaged and successful as I had been with what I was doing in Slack. And at the time, they were using this brand new tool that no one had access to yet. There were beta users of it. It was called Circle. And I thought, okay, well, this is different than Slack. It's new, but I've been wanting a new community platform because Slack doesn't really accommodate communities at all. this is exciting. I would love a chance to play around with this and get it to work. So for the rest of 2020, I think it was about 8 months, I consulted with the team. And towards the end of the year, I helped them hire a community manager, and they started saying, community is going to be a big part of what we do here. I think we're going to change our model away from courses and more towards community. We would like you to lead the community function within Smart Passive Income. But I was starting to do the content stuff. I had my own courses, and I just thought to myself, I don't have the time or space. Like, I'm trying to do the content thing. Plus, I have this accelerator that's very time intensive. That was my main moneymaker at the time. And they said, well, what if we acquire the accelerator and your members can become early members of our new community, SPI Pro, and now you free up all that time because you don't have to do that program anymore. And we'll pay you for that. We'll give you a salary, and you can keep doing the content stuff on the side. And that seemed like a pretty sweet deal, and it was. So I did that for a year.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, even to hear the Circle thing, that you were one of the early users of Circle, and how big that's become as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had sat down at one point with, I have a background in startups, and I was a product manager. So I sat down with one of the most talented developers that I knew, one of the best product designers, and this was probably circa 2018, early 2019. And I said, community tools suck. Like, Slack sucks for this. Can we design a tool for this that is better than what is out there? And we had this big whiteboard up, and we're looking at the landscape of community tools. And I was like, I don't know that I want to go all in on building a startup right now. And I put it to the side, and then Circle lands in my lap. And I think, great, I don't have to build it. I can just use this now, because I think I'm more of a creator and a community builder than I am like a tech founder. I don't think that was really my path in life.
Yeah.
I had a lot of experience there. I did it once, even before, the stuff I'm doing now. I had a business that went through an accelerator, and we raised money and we sold it. But ultimately, it wasn't for me.
And when you were doing the content on the side of it, this was your newsletter and podcast, right? Newsletter started in around 2017, podcast 2019, which was kind of born out of a previous podcast you were doing called Upside. And making content for you, was that kind of straightforward to do alongside the SPI stuff with Pat and the community building consulting?
Well, if we're thinking 2017, when I'm coming towards the tail end of startups and product management, I started to realize that writing was a product. The thing that always frustrated me as a product manager was I talked to users, I understood problems, I knew what the solution how it should operate and what it should do for people. But there was always this compromise of the plan to what ended up happening for whatever reason. Maybe it was timelines that needed to change. Maybe it was the company's finances. Maybe it was the fact that some of these things were technically not feasible, or the designer had a different idea of how this could look. So I could never go from, here's what I think this should be, to seeing it as I thought it could be. And when I realized that I could skip all of that and ship a product that was writing and be exactly what I wanted, I was like, this is everything for me. This is it. This is all I want to do. And that eventually opened the door to online courses. It led way to podcasting. I was really slow on the uptake of social media, because when I got into the creator world, I was reading people like Matt Kimberly, Brian Harris, and they were all about email. Social media bad, social media rented land, email everything, email sells courses. And so I went all in on email, and then eventually on podcasting. And both of those platforms, both those mediums, terrible for audience growth, was just neglecting social media for forever.
That's hilarious, because it's so true. That is really hard to build an audience to start there, for sure.
Totally. That's why it took me 7 years to get to where I am today. People look at what I'm doing now, and yes, the Creator Science brand is 18 months old, but people are like, man, this guy came out of nowhere, and everything's so fast, everything's going so good. It's like, actually, I've been working at this for 7 years, and it felt slow as all get out. It was like I was walking through the mud for 5 years.
Yeah, that's good. That's funny you say that, because it seems like it was really slow, and then maybe all of the sudden, in the sense, when I look at you, like some of your videos, I saw one where you said in 2021 you made 149,000, 2022 you make 338,000, and then 2023 you make 600,000. So boom, boom, boom. But that took, you know what I mean? It was like all this years of in the making.
Totally.
What do you think made it do that? Was it, I know you got into YouTube. Was it just you started to figure some things out, or was there things that you unlocked?
Well, if you look at the last 2 years of revenue, the majority of it is from my membership. You know, the work that I was doing in Slack that led way to the work I was doing with Pat in Circle, which led way to me going back out on my own and starting my own membership. That has been transformative to the business. And, you know, everything about being a creator is resource allocation. And when you have more resources to allocate, you can do more. So, you know, the growth in revenue has allowed for me to do things that grow revenue, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Which has been what for you?
YouTube's a big one. YouTube has started to turn some significant revenue, but it's still a giant cost driver. Like, if I really crunch the numbers, I don't think we've earned anything on YouTube yet. I think we're still in the red. But from a revenue perspective, it's changed quite a bit. We really turned on sponsorship and email about a year ago, and that's been a big change. That's been a big addition, which is nice, because sponsorship used to be just the podcast, and that's the smallest channel we have in terms of actual reach, but it was the biggest one from revenue. So when we figured out how to do more on the sponsorship front, that really started to diversify things. I've systematically gotten a little bit better at selling digital products outside of the membership because it's a priority for me, and I've been experimenting and trying a lot of things. Those are the main drivers: digital products, sponsorship, and the membership, obviously.
Can you share any of the breakdown of revenue, maybe percentage-wise, for each of your various products and income streams you have?
Yeah, let me pull this up actually.
Joe, I love it when people do this. When you ask them a question and they go, yeah, let me just pull it up. And I don't know what they're pulling up. You know, when we had Matt Paulson on and we're like, how much have you earned this year? And he said, we've worked, 2 years ago we were on 7 million and then now we're on 29. I'm like, yeah, you just have that there in front of you? And how much are you spending on advertising? 400,000 to 600,000 a month. Like, what? So Jay, what are you... Where are you going to find this this information for us?
I broke this down about 2 weeks ago for my own knowledge, and then I put it on Twitter. So I just searched for it on Twitter, but I also have it in a spreadsheet that I mostly keep to myself and the people in the lab. But I want to break this down because here's another difference for me. I've never felt, outside of the one video we put on YouTube a few months ago with Jenny Hoyos, I have never felt a moment where I'm like, this is different. This is an outlier. This is changing everything. It's been like small incremental improvements for 7 years. And like, how do you get that? You look at the data and you make small changes. Like in December, I ran this experiment. I'm really excited about this. But I ran this experiment in December where for a few months I was running a promotion through this specific user flow where I offered 50% off my most popular course, and it was becoming a significant part of revenue every month. But I thought to myself, are people buying because the price is so low, or are they buying because 50% is a great offer? And so doing nothing else, I doubled the price, and turns out doubling the price is actually the best thing for me to do from a revenue perspective because it didn't cut conversion in half. So it's little things like this that, you know, I do that for a week here or there. That experiment I ran for a month, 7 years of 12 months, like you can fit in a lot of experiments and data crunching. So I do have the breakdown of the different revenue streams from last year if you want to hear it. Memberships is number one. It was 57% of overall revenue, and that's up from 48% the year before.
Nice.
Sponsorships were 18% of total revenue. The year before it was 17%. And keep in mind, this is not the full story because revenue increased like 68%. So, you know, even if sponsorships is only up 1% of the whole, it's a significant revenue leap year over year.
Yeah.
Digital products were up 10% from 9%. Services were down to 6% from 11%. Royalties were down to 5% from 10%. And affiliates were down to 4% from 6%. But all of those increased in terms of real revenue other than services and royalties.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm sure you're at a spot where the more you can get away from services, probably the better. Make money while you sleep, you know, not have to trade your time for money. So that's actually ideal for you.
Totally. I literally a couple days ago removed the ability to book one-offs with me other than 1 hour at a time. I increased the price to it. For a while, I had a second pricing tier on a lot of my digital products to say you can buy the digital product and 30 or 60 minutes with me. I cut that out because, again, everything as a creator is resource allocation. The one resource I can't increase is my time. And selling that on an hourly basis has no compounding effect. It's literally just a trade, and that's becoming less and less attractive over time. So, I do things like raise the price of that hour with me, but eventually it gets to a point where it's hard for me to even justify how someone should pay for that hour at some point. It is worth it for some folks though, because like I had a call recently with a guy who has a Facebook group of 58,000 members. He has a job board that he was putting up for free. And he stumbled into this opportunity where somebody offered him like $5,000 to send an email to his list. And he was like, I can make money. I was like, man, you are sitting on a gold mine, actually. Here are like a handful of steps that I would take to capture more value out of this. He's, I don't want to charge my members. And I was like, you don't have to. Like here are some completely in integrity ways to create value for your members, create values for a third party, capture value as the person providing the service. So for some people, it makes a whole lot of sense. What it is now is just filtering for who it doesn't make sense for. But I try to serve those people in other ways. The content that we put on YouTube, on the podcast, and email, all that's free. I'm trying to create this giant library of, no matter where you're at, here's something that should help you take the next step. But I can't create that if I'm selling all of my time.
Mm-hmm. So your memberships, 57% of your income, it's huge. What's the difference between those on each of the tiers? Because you've got a basic tier, which is $700 a year. Then you've got $2,000 a year, which you get the community and the office hours. And then for $3,000 a year, you get quarterly coaching with you, Jay. And the basic, I don't believe is limited, but the community is limited to 200 spaces, which is an interesting way to do it. So you can't actually get in unless someone drops off, and even then it's opened up to those in the basic tier. So what's the split between people in the community?
I haven't looked at this in a bit, but if I took a stab, I think it's about 80% the standard tier, about 15% VIP, and probably about 5% the basic tier.
Because in that basic tier, there's a huge amount of value. Like, you have put a ton of effort into creating the courses, and instead of buying them a la carte, which might be useful for some people, you can do it just through this basic membership. How did you decide on those prices? Was that a particularly hard thing for you to do, to go, right?
Yeah.
Much calculation going into figuring that out?
It was hard. It continues to be hard, because the difference between standard and VIP is VIPs get 2 hours of one-on-one time with me throughout the year. And as I've priced that up, it starts making me think, gosh, I need to limit the number of VIP slots and or change the price of that at some point as well for new members. I never change the price for who's already in there. But what I started with, and what I recommend, I have this course called Build a Beloved Membership that teaches you how to build something like this. It was a lot of spreadsheeting in the beginning, because I wanted to think to myself, one, I've been a part of enough communities that I knew there becomes a tension with the way you construct the community and the value you provide and what happens when that scales. If you are trying to create a community where it's about peer-to-peer connection, when you get to a point that's several hundred, close to 1,000, or certainly more than 1,000 people, it becomes more and more challenging to deliver that experience that you were delivering when it was a smaller community. And I just decided I don't even want to deal with trying to scale this. That's not the type of experience I want to scale. I would prefer to keep this small by design and invest more of my time and effort and attention into a smaller number of people, and keep it small enough that people feel like they know the other people around here. But I had to figure out what that looked like financially, because I wanted, in the beginning stages, when there were only a few members, I wanted that to be worth my time. And I wanted to project forward a year from now, 2 years from now, if we're full, do I still feel like this is incentivizing me to spend the kind of time into it that it requires? So I made this complex calculator, which is in the course, to help myself determine, at this price point, with these tiers and some assumptions, like this many members, how much will that generate and how will I feel about that? I wanted to imagine, how would I feel at this many members and these price points all along the way? And this is kind of what it worked out to be. to make me feel like if I kept this place great and everything else went to garbage, would my business, would my family be okay with that? And these were the numbers that made the most sense. Now, I increased that a little bit over time. We increased the price twice through the course of getting up to 200 members. But yeah, this was designed to be like my enough number, essentially.
Jay, how do you think about, with this type of business model, how do you think about churn? Because you could say that if somebody leaves, did they get the value that they needed and now they're successful? And so, that's a good thing, right? Like, do you track that at all?
Nobody asks this or talks about this, but I think about this a lot. The weird thing about a membership is that you basically are setting yourself up for the last experience you have with some of your best audience members to be a decision, I no longer want to invest in this person. Like there's probably no membership that into perpetuity somebody would just renew forever. People change. People make emotional decisions. Circumstances change. So the membership appeals to your biggest fans, but at some point they will probably say, I am no longer getting the value out of this that I want or was. That hurts me emotionally, but that's okay. I do like to think of circumstances change, people change. I actually put a big focus, I won't say a big focus, a bigger focus than most on offboarding. Certainly put a big focus on onboarding. But when somebody leaves the community, immediately I send them an email and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I appreciate you giving this a shot, whether it's for a year, whether it's for 2 years. I know that people change, circumstances change. I'd love to hear what would have made this more valuable to you. But first and foremost, I want to let you know that our relationship is still intact and I will still be cheering you on. Because I've had the circumstance where I quit paying for a thing and I know that person. I feel like I built a relationship and I'm thinking, I wonder if they're upset. I wonder if they feel less good about me. So I try to get ahead of that. Mm-hmm. From a churn perspective, here's an interesting thing that I didn't really think about, but turned out to be so smart. When we hit our 200 member cap, I increase the price. So anyone who comes in after we hit that cap, somebody turns out, someone comes in, I actually have a positive relationship to churn because that increases my ARR. I'm not trying to run people out, but it does incentivize me to say, who's not using this? And if someone wants to come in, I have bought out probably 24 members, like a pro rata of the remainder of their membership. Somebody wants to come in, they're a great fit. I go find someone that's not using it or maybe not be a great fit anymore. And I say, can I buy out the rest of your membership? And that makes a whole lot of sense, even from a revenue perspective.
Wow, that's interesting.
So I've created a pretty positive relationship with churn.
And again, I still think that you could measure it in the sense of that graduation of a member that's churned is not necessarily a bad thing, or that you didn't fulfill the value that you promised. It was just you actually did deliver on that, and so now they're successful and they've leveled up.
That kind of comes down to how you design the experience, because for the lab, I would say that's probably not quite true in the way that I've designed and promised the experience. Sometimes people want to build a membership purely from the standpoint of they want recurring revenue. They're like, that would be awesome. It would be. But to recognize recurring revenue, you need to provide recurring value. So what is the thing that you're promising that lends itself to a recurring promise? And so for the lab, I wanted that to be the best place for professional creators to experiment and learn together. By that nature, if you continue being a professional creator, it should continue to deliver value. Yeah. But some people will say, this membership takes you from A to B, and if you get to that point B, then yeah, you graduate out of it. But sometimes I think, I don't know if that's the best. I don't know if membership's the best model to support that.
So we've talked about your membership. This is your main revenue driver, but you've got this whole other part of the business, the content, which looking at it from afar, Jay, is just incredible. You've got your Creative Science newsletter, 50,000 plus subscribers, your podcast with millions of downloads, formerly Creative Elements. It's the podcast that I listen to every single episode because I know the quality is going to be incredible. And then this year you put a lot of focus into YouTube as well. You've grown to 63,000 subscribers, and a few months ago you had your first big hit video of Jenny Hoyos with 2 million views. So a ton of this content, Jay. How do you make it all work?
I have a difficult relationship to it sometimes because I know it's not very efficient. There are some creators who are like machines. Justin Welsh, Sahil Bloom, Dan Coe, these people are absolute machines. And a lot of what they do is they have this very smart, planned system of, this is kind of like where I lead with my ideas, and it becomes this, and it becomes this, and it becomes this, and even slotted in like days of the week. It's very systematized in that way. I've never been good at doing that. Everything I create feels bespoke and sometimes disconnected because I'm trying to cover a huge breadth of platforms. This is not podcast science. This is not YouTube science. It's creator science. Creators are all over the place doing all kinds of stuff. So if sometimes I get really excited about the idea of doing a series. Hey, this month I'm only going to talk about podcasting. Well, you know what? I know from data that's about 10% of my audience. I don't actually know if that's the right percentage offhand, but let's say it's 10%. That means that 90% of the people following my stuff are going to tune out for a month. It's really tough. So I end up being like pretty all over the place on all of these platforms, talking about all kinds of stuff. And that is difficult. What I'm thinking about more and more, though, is everything I create, I want it to be rather enduring, at least comparatively so to other people who are creating content. Like, I want to publish the ideas that I can reference in future articles and it makes sense. I want to publish things that once they're published, they continue to work for me. So much of content today is extremely ephemeral. It's like I put 5 hours into creating just the best short form vertical video. I'm thinking of people like Connor Price who create these amazing short form videos. Probably takes them about 5 hours to produce one asset. And, 6 months from now, what's that doing? Almost nothing, virtually nothing. So I think a lot about my content as a body of work, and I want to see how can I make things that are almost linear in nature, that I can make the user journey through discovering and consuming it as bingeable as possible. YouTube does a pretty good job of this out of the box. We've made playlists on Spotify for the podcast. So if I am a course creator, here's a curated list of the interviews we've done with course creators. I haven't figured this out as well as I'd like to with my writing on the blog, but it's a big priority for me right now because the best signal of product market fit, in my opinion, is hearing from people who are new to you. I just found you and I've been binging this for however much time. The word binge in like audience feedback is absolute gold. Yeah. And I see that on YouTube. I hear it for the podcast. I don't hear it for my writing because I don't think it's organized in a way that facilitates binging of it. So everything I do, I try to figure out how do I make this more bingeable. I don't know what type of system I could do on social media for that. Something I see on short form video is people say like, they name a series, this thing part 1, this thing part 2. So you find one of those videos, it's titled part 1 or part 2, and you say, what was part 1? Is there a part 3? So I'm constantly thinking, how do I organize this in a way that can be binged?
I mean, thinking about the experiment stuff that you do, I would actually be really curious, Jay, if you did double down on not just a topic, but also a medium. I mean, how far across, let's talk about the platforms and the way you deliver this content. You've got X, YouTube. Are you on LinkedIn?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you're across everything. How do you... my mind is exploding because even for me, with Lemon Squeezy, we've made a deliberate choice to just play in the Twitter X space. We just only this year, we've maybe explored a little bit of LinkedIn, and then I'm doing a little bit of YouTube with James now, but we're 3 years into this. So have you ever thought about that? Or is it, I only want to focus on the creators over here and just really double down and make this content great, and then I'll explore expanding from there?
If I could go back in time and do it differently, I would. At this point, it would be a radical shift that I think would erode a lot of trust I've built with a lot of people. And at some point, I'm going to reintroduce all these things anyway. Because if I think about the logical conclusion of this business, it's got all these different verticals. So I've taken the harder path that I think 9 out of 10 times you try to do what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it, you're going to get burned out and fail. You'll probably give up. I think you'll give up before you fail, but I think I'm too committed at this point to make a change and go one platform specific.
Is it just you, Jay, that's creating all that content and putting it together, or do you have a team, or do you have I guess you just said you don't really, it's bespoke, so it's not really a quote unquote a science to it.
I have a video editor who's pretty much full time, and through editing our videos, that means that half of the podcast episodes are also edited by someone else.
Okay.
I do a fair amount of the editing of our other audio episodes, though I've gotten better at the process in creating the asset so that there's less editing to be done. But recording and writing, that's all me. So there is a limitation there. And I've constructed the business in such a way that there is a world where I hire other content creators who create underneath the Creator Science brand. The question I run into a lot is that the business I want to build? And I don't know that it is. I think if I built that business, it would be for the explicit purpose of creating an enterprise that could be sold. I see the value of that. I don't know that that's the plan I have for this container.
What is your process for planning, scheduling, recording, editing? Because you've done this for so long now. You say every bit's bespoke, but I'm assuming there are processes in place for each to make sure it's all working seamlessly and you've got enough backlog of content and episodes. How does all that work?
I wish I had a backlog of anything. To publish as much as I do as an individual, there is no backlog. There are deadlines that I'm well aware of, and I get it done because it has to be done. I know which parts of the work I can front load enough that I can deliver on a short timeline. Like, I have a bank of interviews that have been recorded, so it's easy for me to take that raw material and mix a final episode. But I don't have finished episodes I'm sitting on. Actually, right now at this moment, I have one finished episode that could go next week. So I am ahead of podcasting by one episode. But most of the time, it's writing a couple days before, day before, if I'm honest, a lot of times. I have processes to support everything so that it can be as efficient as possible outside of the bottleneck that is me creating something. But it's just based on deadlines and a crippling fear of not following through on my promises.
Wow. So what are your deadlines for each thing? Because for me, with the client edits I do, I have my recording days, I have my editing days, and I have published days. And I just have to make sure I stick to those. So what is it for you? What are your deadlines? How are your days planned out to make sure you're getting this content out on time every week?
Our main newsletter sends every Sunday morning. We have an audio episode that airs every Tuesday morning. Often, I'll send a second email on Tuesday or Wednesday to support that. YouTube will air about twice a month on a Monday, so it'll actually go out today that we're recording this. LinkedIn, I publish every morning. Twitter, I publish once a day. Instagram, I publish every morning. That's pretty much it. So, as much as I can get ahead of that, that's great. But a lot of times, it's kind of ahead of that. I should say, on LinkedIn and Instagram in particular, I have been working for the last couple of months with an agency that's been helping me take existing ideas that I have, things that I've already written, and put that into usually graphic form that can be shared. And then we collaborate on that. I kind of sign off on it. I edit the captions to make sure that it's in my voice. So I have had support on Instagram and LinkedIn for the last several months. I think I'm going to bring that back in-house, though, at the beginning of this coming month. And we'll see what that does to production. Because before working with them, I was not publishing as much on Instagram in particular. But I haven't been seeing the return on the investment, to be quite honest. And so I'm going to reallocate those funds elsewhere.
What's the biggest, most impactful channel for you? Because I feel that each of the channels you use serve a different purpose. And I guess the big ones, newsletter, podcast, YouTube. YouTube, you've spent a lot of time and effort. The level of production that goes into YouTube arguably is more than you might have to for the podcast and newsletter. Does that ring about true? And does that equal more impact?
Yeah, I mean, they serve different purposes. I think historically for the business, email has been the moneymaker. And I think if you look just purely at a revenue standpoint, even today, email's doing the heavy lifting. But I think a lot of the growth we felt over the last 18 months since the name really solidified, I think a lot of it's being driven by YouTube, to be quite honest. Because if you just take that Jenny Hoyo's video in isolation, that video has more views than the podcast has downloads all time. And a download is not a listen, So it kind of it's beautiful and depressing to think that this one video that we probably, we put a lot of time into it. I would imagine we put upwards of 40 hours into producing that video. But that one video has had a bigger outcome than almost 4 years of the podcast's existence. So the ceiling is so much higher on YouTube. And increasingly, I'm trying to invest in places where the ceiling is higher. This is another reason why I'm keen to figure out Instagram this year, because Instagram is just so much bigger than Twitter. I've had a lot of success on Twitter. Instagram as a platform is so much bigger than Twitter. The opportunity there, the ceiling there is so much higher than anything I could do over there. That being said, I think for the lab specifically, which is more than half of my overall revenue, I think half of the revenue that went into the lab came from Twitter. So platforms are different. I do find that an audience on Twitter is more valuable than an audience on Instagram on average, if you look at like the average value of a follower, I guess. But there's just such a higher ceiling on Instagram.
JR, do you feel like all of this stuff we're hearing from Jay is like he's a skilled professional in what he's doing, and he's far past a lot of people that are starting out, right?
Yeah, I mean, James, he's like the level 100, and for someone that's level 1 or 2 or 3, that they've got a decent skill, or they've got a decent, I don't know, expertise. What advice would you give them, Jay, if they're just starting out?
I think it's important to understand the differences between certain platforms. And the way that I break it down is this binary between relationship platforms and discovery platforms. Discovery platforms have a built-in mechanism for new people to discover your work. It's usually an algorithm because that platform as a whole is incentivized to capture as much human attention as possible, and they monetize it with ads. So we're talking social media, all social media platforms, and YouTube predominantly. You could say search as well, Google search. Those platforms are designed to match high-performing, engaging content with attention that's being put onto the platform. That is how you build an audience in terms of people discovering your work, pure numbers of people who know about you. Then you have relationship platforms, and these are systems of distribution that you own that don't have a third-party intermediary determining whether your content gets in front of people who have decided they want it. Podcasting, email, SMS, and I would put private communities in that bucket as well. The game is utilizing discovery platforms to bring people into your relationship platforms. You want to build a system of distribution and relationships that you own that no one can get in the middle of. But, as I discovered, building an audience through email and podcasting, very hard because there's no innate discovery mechanism. We're starting to see some change in email with recommendations, but I just want people to understand, not all platforms are created equal. It's not really a question of, should I do email or should I do Instagram? The answer might just be yes, because they serve different purposes, and you have to understand those purposes, and you have to design your content strategy appropriately. I would recommend choosing one discovery platform as your lead and one relationship platform, and really I think everyone should start with email. The world of discovery is kind of bifurcated as well. You can decide, am I drawn towards writing or am I drawn towards video? If you're drawn towards video, you could ostensibly do Instagram Reels, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts without a whole lot of incremental time to do all three. I would still pick one to lead with because the culture of those platforms is a little bit different, so you should really design for one first and foremost. But, to say I'm going to do TikTok and LinkedIn and email, that's a huge proposition in my opinion. That's 3 very different mediums.
And I mean, Jay, you did a wonderful thread on this, which I'll leave a link to in the show notes, saying if you were starting over in 2024, here's what you do. First one, choose a word or phrase to become associated with, create a free email-based course, choose a discovery platform like you alluded to, align your digital footprint with your premise, study. I love this point. Go hard on your discovery platform, social followers to your free email course, start writing an evergreen long-form email newsletter, listen to your intuition, start offering one-to-one consulting, cross-promote with other newsletters, roll out newsletter sponsorship, create a signature product, increase ad inventory, stay the course, and ignore distractions. So good. That is how long did that take you to write?
Well, I mean, at that point, that was a remix of a thread I did a year earlier. That was my highest performing thread ever. And I was like, let me update this because some of these things I don't believe in the same way. And then this also becomes something that I repurposed for email. I finally found an efficient thing. I repurposed it to email. That email performed really well. So, some of my highest performing things don't take all that long at all because I have been distilling it in the background through conversations for months leading up to it. So in some ways it took forever. But when it actually came down to writing this is like a summary of dozens of conversations I've had, on the phone, on Twitter, in the lab for the past 12 months.
It's awesome. It really is. And this, of course, is saying if someone's starting over in 2024, here's what you do. You're obviously not starting over in 2024. Whole new year, reset, new plans, goals. You've actually, people are on your Twitter, you've got a new baby coming in summer of 2024. Congratulations. That's very exciting for you. That's certainly going to be life-changing. Your wife joined the business this year as well, so that's awesome. What's your plan for 2024? What you're going to do with the business, preparing for having a little one as well?
I'm simplifying the product suite a little bit. It's another lesson I've learned the hard way. I'm developing 2 new products right now, and then I'm basically going to unpublish most of the rest, so that the question is really, are you a professional creator yet? If not, this is for you. Are you? If yes, This is for you. And simplifying my own marketing efforts in that way, because I would prefer to basically give people one call to action, one entry point to determine where to go. I've produced so many assets in the form of products over the years that even that complexity isn't necessarily helpful. Some people write me like, I'm not sure where to start. And so I'm simplifying that. Simplifying the product suite, getting the business to a place of good automation from a customer journey standpoint, so that in the middle of the year we can take maternity and paternity leaves and make sure we get by with creating new content, but mostly outside of that, things continue to grow.
Jay, so you went double, was that just by chance, or are you a big goals guy? Like, are you hungry? You're like, I got to get to 1.2 million. Like, is there a number? Like, what, how do you think about that?
I had no revenue goal for the previous year. I wanted to see things go up. I like when things go up. But we got to a point where I'm not motivated by like contrived, arbitrary numbers anymore, because I just find enjoyment in other aspects of my life. Yeah. Like I see a lot of people who are very goal oriented. They're achieving incredible things from a metrics perspective, and they're living extremely different lives than I am. They often don't have a partner. They don't have kids. It's not even like in their eye line yet. And like this is their world. My world has expanded outside of the business. So, things expanded just by nature of these small tweaks to seeing like, this is working, let's make it better. This is working, let's make it better. And the chips kind of fell where they fell. I don't really have a revenue goal this year. I think it would be like cool theoretically to hit 7 figures, but goals like that only really serve you if you're looking at them so frequently and making changes to influence that outcome. So if I were to say my biggest goal this year is 7 figures, then, I've got to generate, $83,000 per month or something.
Yep.
And I would be looking at that on a monthly basis and say, how am I tracking towards that? What are the biggest levers I can pull to get towards that? And I think that will happen, but I would rather it happen on the trajectory that it is, because I think at this point, for me to make big changes that result in big revenue changes, I'm taking that time away from some other part of my expanded world. And it's probably going to be my wife, and it's probably going to be my kid in the next 6 months. So we are doing okay. I would rather enjoy my day to day and save time to do things outside of work.
So what are you doing outside of work for you, outside of the lab, in your personal time?
I've been doing a lot more exercising, which has been great because I feel better. I sleep better. I don't avoid looking in mirrors as much. We have 2 young dogs that have a lot of energy. But really, the biggest thing that I needed to get back to was spending more time with my wife. And that would certainly become more challenging with a kid in the picture too. So like, part of getting older also is I just don't have the same attention span. It gets to be about 4:00 and I'm done mentally. There's just not a whole lot I'm going to be able to do anymore. And that's fine. I like looking at the clock and being like, oh, I have several hours of being awake, not working, not going to sleep. Some days, you look up and it's 7 or 8 p.m. and you think, okay, I'm done working now, but I also go to bed at 9:30 or 10. I guess it's tomorrow now. It's nice to have a buffer. And honestly, like the more open space I have, the more boredom I create. It is productive in different ways. My best ideas happen when I'm not frantically thinking about something else. I have this goal this year of starting 1,000 conversations, and that's as simple as sending an average of 3 outbound messages to people per day, and some days I don't hit 3, some days I have to do 4 or 5, but I have more space. I'm walking on the treadmill for 40 minutes. Great. Let me fire off 3 messages. Those things actually have higher leverage. It's unpredictable, but higher leverage than you think. And I'm just trying to create more space for it.
I love this 1,000 conversations. I saw this.
Yeah. I'm intrigued. What does that come from? What is that for?
I was listening to a podcast. I think it was My First Million. They interviewed Jesse Itzler, and he shared this is a practice that he does. He used to write handwritten notes, but he realized he could send a message, a no ask message, in about 45 seconds. He says, if I do that 3 times a day, it's 3 minutes a day, and I could start 1,000 conversations that way. I've long thought that one of my biggest areas of improvement where I'm holding myself back is just being more collaborative, more friendly, building more relationships in and around the business. And this gave me a system for that. And, I think that's going to lead to a more fulfilled, happy life. And I'm sure it will pay off in the business in some ways too.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And Jay, in terms of your health and fitness, you say you're doing a lot of it. You've done amazing work in the last couple of months, even going from 205 pounds down to 188 quite recently. Invested 10 grand in your garage gym with 0 regrets. Tell us about that.
We bought a new house last summer, and it had a 3-car garage. I have no interest in having 3 cars. Third bay of the garage, I thought it would be great if I had a workable home gym here, because we used to have a great community center near our house, and I could literally walk there. As a half mile away. I could walk there, work out, walk back, get some steps in along the way. We don't have a community rec center here that's close. And, even if it's a 15, 20-minute commute each way, that's a significant part of your day when you value your time as highly as I do. Now I can literally just walk to the garage and get any type of workout that I want in there. And 30 minutes that would be just gone in the commute, I could do a full workout in that time. So it's been a game changer. It's awesome. I've never been much of a consumer of YouTube either. And now when I go in the gym, I'm watching something on YouTube, and it's really helping me learn the language of the platform, the culture. It's a very enjoyable double dip of that time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. James, I was saying this last week with Justin Jackson on, where this is what I do too. When I go in my gym, I consume YouTube while I'm doing it. It's great.
What do you watch, JR? What's on your YouTube recommended?
Well, I mean, I've got like some weird things with, golf or hockey or whatever I'm doing there. But yeah, like there's a lot of podcasts that I watch. I like to watch the video version of a podcast, and I feel like I connect more with those people. I watch My First Million, all those guys.
How do you consume podcasts, Jay? And what are you listening to at the moment?
I almost always audio, because usually podcasts have been consumed while I run, while I work out. Now it's actually shifting more to video, because a lot of my workouts are happening in the garage where there's a TV. But historically, it's usually been audio. And I usually listen to shows about the creative process, but not necessarily content creation. I'm really enjoying David Perell's new podcast, How I Write. I think it's extremely well done. And there's a video version of that. So whether I'm walking or out of the house, I can listen to that. I've always liked Song Exploder. I've liked Dissect. I like You Made It Weird. That's a comedy show. I still listen to a fair amount of Tim Ferriss's podcast. That was the first podcast I ever listened to. And his ability to remain relevant and interesting as I've really changed over the last 10 years, pretty incredible when you think about it. I think if you look at your own listening behavior, you've probably graduated from most podcasts you ever listened to. And for him in particular, incredible staying power in my life. So that's the rotation.
Yeah. What about books that you're reading? I can see in your background you've neatly cut. Did you neatly color code your books?
Absolutely.
Or was that your wife?
No, obviously that's my wife. So I've never been a big reader either. I was getting into audiobooks, but now small system that's helped a lot. I try to read a paragraph. Or a chapter, I should say, a chapter of a book before bed.
Nice.
And so I just binged through both of Morgan Housel's books, because I think they're written in a very unique way that we can learn a lot from, regardless of what platform you create on. Reading some baby books. reading books about writing books. Started reading 4,000 Hours, but that's like kind of the classic, you get it from the title sort of book. Yeah, that's what's been on my shelf.
What about some creators that you want to shout out that are up and coming? Maybe those that are even in the lab that you want to share?
Well, there's a bunch of them. One that comes to mind is Justin Moore. He is just doing the best work out there to help people learn all things sponsorship. My friend Daphne Williams has been doing great work helping teachers transition out of the classroom if they want, or at least create a new stream of income. Her brand is called the Teacher Career Coach. Let's see, who else do I want to put on the spot? Becky David Pearson is someone who, I literally met Becky because she filled out a listener survey for the podcast years ago and won this little contest I was doing. And she was one of the first members of the lab. And I've seen her go from working at General Assembly to getting a full-time job at Boss Babe, learning a ton, leaving to go do her own thing now. She's helped me a lot with the way I think about customer journey mapping. And that's the thrust of what she does in her content now. And I think it's really useful and really needed.
Well, Jay, you've been incredible. It's been so much fun sort of digging in a little bit more depth your business and how everything's working for you. I always find when I get the opportunity to re-interview someone that I've had on Indie Bites where I have less time to chat to them, and I get to chat to them on Lemon Squeezy, which is a bit more about creators and what they're doing, I feel very grateful. So thank you for speaking so articulately about the topics. Very grateful.
Thank you guys for having me. JR, it's great to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, you've been awesome.
Okay, all right.